Okay, hello everyone and welcome to the third seminar. Today we are going to concentrate mainly on the Dized teaching method and learning method as well, and then we will do work related on logic and a game loop. So first of all, hopefully this won't take as long as the previous one, so let's try to make it a bit tighter. And we won't do a whole lot of animations this time, so we will mainly focus on stuff that happens on the flow editor. And let's get started. I'm gonna share my screen first of all. There we go. So let's hop into it. So this is where we left off the last time. We created the very introduction of the game. We asked the amount of players. We had a little bit of logic that dictated on where the flow goes, depending on the amount of players chosen and how the setup is done. And as a reminder, we won't. This project is not Escape from Babylon. While I use its assets, I just make up rules as they come. So you won't be able to do like your practice project based on this. This is more of just having different sort of examples that you can use when you create your practice project and your live project. I'm trying to include a little bit of everything that you will need when you create projects. So this is where we left off, and now first of all we're gonna talk a little bit of the Dized teaching method, since we have discovered during the years that the most efficient way to learn games is to learn anything is to learn by doing. So this is what Dized tutorials will always highlight, and this is where all the logic comes in. So our main goal is to instruct players in a short way and then ask them to execute upon those rules that we taught. So this is what we will concentrate heavily on today, and this is what makes Dized tutorials so great and of course interactive, is that we can ask questions and move the flow based on the answers. Does the player need additional information or not? Should we give it or should we skip it? We try to reduce as much repetition in the tutorials as possible, since that will easily cause a lot of frustration, and that is one of the main things that we want to avoid, the player frustration. So we will look into different ways how we can work with that. There are different ways to create Dized tutorials, and most of them are kind of a hybrid of these three methods that I'm going to introduce. First of all, we have a kind of a snake flow that I like to call a snake, where the flow just goes looping from one end to the other, and there's not a whole lot of going back in the tutorial. This works for games where players, for example, play at the same time and we don't have to show steps again and again, and for very simple games. We have very few of those games or tutorials like that, but that is definitely one way to do certain games. And the more common ways that we do are, first of all, there's a looping structure that we'll take a look today. For example, when there are 4 players and everyone gets to play a turn, and they will use the same rules, but we don't want to copy the steps again and again, so we'll use the same steps, but we'll just reduce the information available for the second and third and fourth player. That's kind of a looping structure where the loop goes around and around until it breaks and goes to someplace else. And then there's a menu structure. Usually we end up using loop and menu both in tutorials, and the menu is what you've probably seen also in tutorials, where you end up, especially towards the end of the tutorial, in a screen where you can push a button and it will throw you to somewhere in the tutorial and give you additional information or repeat that information to you about a certain thing or aspect. And this is how we implement our kind of a logic towards the learn by doing. So you need information about something, you are about to do something, you will learn about it and then you will do it. So try to reduce the repetition and give options to players. And first of all, I will give a quick look on what we will build today. It's good to draft beforehand at least the basis of the flow that you're going to build. Whether you use post-it notes or pen and paper or Google Sheets, it doesn't matter. But I'm going to show you one example of what I used. So I built a Google Sheets, kind of a very simple flow structure that we're going to do. So we will start the game by giving a bit of information and go through a logic that will add one round. So basically what we'll try to achieve is to do a round counter. And well, actually this should be a turn. Well, anyway, I'm gonna fix it. Where we will track the player's turns and rounds. So whenever the flow goes through this, it will add +1 to it. And then it will give the first player information. And after it's done giving first player information, the logic will end up, or the flow will end up here at the end, where it will dictate, do we go to round 2? Has every player played? If not, then the flow will loop in the beginning and add one more turn here. Then after that it will go to second player turn and it will ask, do you want a recap of the turn? Do you got it? Did you understand the first time around? Do you want a repetition? If we don't, it will go straight to the end. Otherwise it will repeat the first player's information that the first player got. And this is how we can reduce the repetition and have it available if players need it. So it's here, flow is here, wondering where should it go. Is there a third player? If it is, it will go in the to the beginning of here. It will add one turn and it will ask, go to third player flow and ask, do you want a recap? Did you understand the first time around? Great. If you did, then it'll just skip to the end. Otherwise, again, it will repeat the information. And when all players have played their turn, it will go to round 2. So let's just fix that as it should be. So there we go. This is what we're going to build. The end result will look a bit more complicated, but this is the basis of it. We add stuff in the middle, but as we do it little by little, keeping it light like this avoids a bit of confusion. So let's get started. First of all, we're going to take a look on the globals again. This actually, that was the wrong example here. This is what we will build. So we've been looking at the globals every now and then. And today we're going to talk a bit about the round and turns. These are preset variables that you don't have to create them, where we can take follow the current rounds and current turns of the game. So for example, I'm gonna see one thing here. Yep. So let's do the globals. So current round, it is going to be 1. As the game begins, we will set the current round as 1 as we are playing the first round. This default value means that whatever you set here will when you start the tutorial, it will be that. So if I set the current round as 3 and then start the tutorial, then the current round value, the variable, it will be 3, but we will have it as 1 since we are playing the first round. Now, as I showed in the presentation, right in the beginning we are going to start tracking turns. So I'm gonna keep the turn as 0, and you're going to see soon enough why. So as a reminder, these are the containers that hold information that we can call upon later, and you'll see very soon what they are, how we're gonna use them. So this is all we need for globals right now. We'll check one more variable soon, since we did dabble with it before when we set the amount of players. I'm gonna go here and see we had the players count set as 2 or set as 3. So we will need the players count value as well. Right now it's 0, but when players actually use the tutorial and they push 2, this will change to for that 2. Then we can use that later. Right now it's 0 as nobody has chosen anything, and that can be the default value. Okay, let's continue then. What we will need during the tutorial are 2 new buttons, and I had those available in the asset pack, so let's create them right now. What we will need is a recap button and a yes and a no. So as before, we go to Smart Object Explorer, we choose the UI folder, which already hosts 2 of our buttons. So we will copy these, rename it button help, edit it, change the texture. Let's open the Asset Explorer. This takes just a small while. In our projects and our seminar folder, UI folder, we should have already a couple of textures. Yes. So I have these available already. So this is the help button, no and a yes. I will upload the textures already. And let's create all the 3 buttons here at once. So this would be the help, which is the question mark. We'll choose it, select and save, and we have created the help button like that. And then we will just rinse and repeat. Do a button yes, copy and edit, and then change texture to yes, save. And then the 3rd button is button no, change name, copy edit, change texture, and we are done. This is all the assets that we are going to need today, so we won't create anymore. As said, we won't spend time animating basically at all, so we don't need anymore. So let's start moving the flow. Now I want to kind of reboot the flow back to the left side. Since setup is done, I kind of want to turn on a completely new page in a manner of speaking. So I'm going to take the flow down here, and how I do that is I use these logic blocks as waypoints. Since the flow flows through these logic blocks and players don't even see them, I can use these to guide my flow. So I'm gonna add a logic block, and there we go. I'll set it here to give a bit more space, and I'm going to rename it as waypoint 001. These are good to name in the same manner, so when you take a look at, for example, the list mode later on, you will immediately see what logic blocks are just guiding your flow, and what logic blocks like this actually have logic in them. You can thank me later when you have about 100 logic blocks and you're trying to figure out where some logic happens. So I'm gonna add another logic, just another waypoint, and I'm gonna take it to the left side. And this is kind of a best practices way of doing stuff. I like to do it like this to create a structure that always when a kind of a setup changes to gameplay, it'll go back to the left side, but there's basically nothing stopping you from creating it in a different way. So this will be called waypoint 002. Okay, let's get started and start creating this. So first of all, we will do the setup is now done. We will give the players a quick overview of the goal of the game. They don't need to know much, but they will need a little bit of motivation to get them started. Like, okay, first player, your goal is to do this. Let's start playing. So we will do that in a very short way. There we go. Let's give this a name. Turn 1, 001. So this is the first step of turn 1. There we go. Or it could be actually first round. That would make more sense. And this will be called goal of the game. There we go. And it shall be autoplay as true, since we're just giving information and not asking players to do anything. And let's do a quick goal of the game is to reach the city of Susa by playing movement cards from your hand. There we go. Let's do let's put the text to speech option, and then there we have it. Okay, then to separate this information from the actual now players, it's time to start playing. We'll do another step here. It's called round 1, 002, start game. There we go. And it shall be autoplay true. Give it a voiceover. Then we'll do two important bits here. So the first of all is that now let's start the game. Before this, I'm going to add a little bit of information which is very good to have in each tutorial, since when you're building examples, they will look different than what the players have on the table. You might have different colored meeples, you might have different cards in front of you, and this might confuse players, especially if they haven't used tutorials before. So I'm going to add, please note that the examples used in the tutorial might differ from what you have on your table. Now let's start the game. This will prepare the players, like, okay, I don't need to actually do 100% what they see in the tutorial. Just a small thing. Now, the first thing we wanted to do is add the turn, as seen here. So we will start the first player's turn. We're gonna add a logic block and do a very simple logic here. So this is where the tutorial will always come to when it comes to the beginning. This will be called logic +1 turn. And we will open it up. We could add all the logic later on as well, but I'm going to do it as we go. We're gonna, as we don't need any conditions here, if then stuff, we just need to add 1 turn. We will push the plus button here, and we will do an increment variable. This option means that whenever the flow comes here, 1 variable is incremented by 1, and we want to increment turn. So when the flow comes here, this variable will add you will add 1 to this variable. So turn will become 1, and this will be then the first player's turn. We already set the round as 1 by default, and now when the flow comes through here, the turn will also be set in the beginning as 1. So next bit of information that we're going to do is another logic block. So when the logic comes here, it needs to understand whose turn is it, which flow do we want to go. So in the beginning, of course, it's going to be the first player's turn, so we don't even need to actually touch this logic right now. I'm going to rename it anyway, so you'll understand, and I will understand what logic it is. Whose turn is it? It's the first turn, and that means that the turn is 1. I'm gonna add a content. This will be the first player's flow, the first bit of information. I'm going to separate the flow here, like that. And now I'm going to add a bit of logic in it already. We will finish up the logic in this later, but let's do the first bit. Now we do need to add a condition, since this tutorial needs to check if the turn is 1. And if it is, then it has to go to a block called, what was it? It was called step 24 right now. So if turn is 1, go to step 24. And we'll save. Currently there are no other steps where it even can go, so we'll come back and edit this later. But this is a very simple logic. If turn 1, go here. Right now it cannot be anything else, since the flow comes here and it adds 1 to the turn. So this is called round 1, 003, first player. And this is probably going to be autoplay, as it's an introduction to the first player's turn. So we can add the text here, first player, you're up. And it flows right through it and then keeps on going. Now we will start giving the information to the first player. It will be a very kind of a grassroots information where we give every bit of information that they will need on their turn. So for example, this could be called round 1, 004, and info on movement. In the game, you move your meeple on the track by playing a card in your hand. As we had in setup, you only get 1 card in your hand, so you play that and you move your meeple. We'll put a voiceover, and it can be autoplay true, since this is general information. We don't ask you to do anything at this stage. It's just to show this is how you do it. This is the learning part, and then we will go to the execution. This is where you do execute on the thing that you just learned. I'll name it round 1, 005, play a card and move. Save. So now we will ask the players to do something. Play a card table, move your meeple, mount on the card. Add a voiceover to it, and now as we ask the players to do something, the autoplay has to be off. It has to wait. Let's save. There we go. We could ask, especially since this is the first player's turn and they don't necessarily understand how Dized tutorials work, so we'll add a tap forward after you're done. Okay, perfect. And now after the player is done, we'll there's one more thing they need to do on their turn. We add another step. It creates the connection. We name it this and then discard the card. Now discard card you just used. Discard the card you just played to a discard pile next to the board. This will instruct them to start a discard pile as well if it hasn't been started yet. Give it a voiceover. Autoplay is off. We ask players to do something. That's it. Okay. The next bit of information we need to give the players is add another content to refill their hand and end their turn. This is the full turn of the players in this imaginary game that we're building. Refill and end your turn. Refill your hand. This concludes your turn. And again, tap forward when you're ready. That's always good to give. Autoplay, once again, off. Okay, we have reached the end of the first player. Let's give a little bit of a guiding logic block here again. There we go. I'm gonna give it a name end turn. I immediately will know what it is. It always, when the turn ends, I can always guide the flow here. So what we need to do is add the logic block. As I showed here, we need to have a block that checks where the tutorial will start going. There we go. Logic, go to round 2. Now this is probably the most complicated logic that we are going to do today. So I'm actually going to leave it a bit later. In short, what this logic block will do, it will check if the player amount is the same as the turn amount. And if it is, then break to round 2. Don't worry about it now. Let's continue with the loop and figure out how to break out of it later on. So let's guide the flow. Let's say that, okay, there's another player to go. Let's guide it back to the beginning. Second player. Let's create these waypoints. There we go. Add another waypoint and then start creating the actual loop. The topic of today's exercise, the play loop. You can see it already starting to form here. So this is another guiding block. Once again, it will just take the flow to the beginning and it will become easy to follow. So second player's turn, we will go through the logic block that adds increments turn variable by 1. So I'm going to connect them. So now the second player's turn starts. The turn will be 2. 1 plus 1 is 2, of course. So whose turn is it? Let's create the second player's flow here. We're going to add a content step first. There we go. Let's set it here above, and we were round 1 0 0 8, and it's called second player, and it can be autoplay true since it just states that second player you're up, and text to speech autoplay on. Perfect. Now let's break this connection, since we want to have it as logic and not as a default connection. The lighter blocks is always, that's the default place where it will go, but we don't want to have a default place. We want to have a logic that dictates where it needs to go. So if turn is 1, it goes to first player. Let's add another piece of logic. If turn equals 2, then go to block second player. So once again, when the flow comes here, it will start reading from the top. If turn is 1, go here, but it is not, so it will keep on going down. Okay, another operator, if turn is 2, go here. Perfect. So that is a bit of more logic here in this block, and it will create this. Then we will give the players a little bit of information, since when the first player plays, they will not have a situation where two meeples are in the same square, but the second player, that can happen. So this is called 001, and it's note meeples cannot share the same square. If one is up in the same square, it needs to go forward 1 step. In the same normal. Let's actually add that. I'll explain later why. Give it a voiceover, and this is, once again, this is just a flow through information. We learn something and we don't have to execute, so it goes through it. Now we will add, we forgot to give it a name, just a second. We will call it additional information. Now the first player shouldn't hear this before the second player's turn. This cannot happen on the first turn, so we will not teach about it. It can happen on the second player's turn, so that's when we teach about it. Okay, let's round 1, 0, 10, and then ask, now play your card and your meeple. And then we will ask, tap on the button if you want a full recap of turn, otherwise tap forward after you are done. Now autoplay false. This step will now ask the players if they want a full recap of the first turn. Did they follow what the first player did? If they did, then they can just skip this. Otherwise, if they didn't follow or they didn't understand, they can repeat the same steps as the first player did. So it needs to go here. Let's add the buttons. So we created the button help. Let's add it here. Since we don't put anything else here right now, it doesn't matter. We'll just put it here. Give it a logic called go to block. It was called info and movement. And now when the players come to this step, if they want the additional help, they can push the button and go to the flow here, and they will get the whole explanation again. And if they don't, and they push forwards, it will go to end turn. What happens then? It goes to logic here, and it will figure out, do they want to go to round 2 or not. Let's say no. There's a third player. It goes back in the beginning. Logic once again adds 1 + 1 to the turn variable. So now on the third player's turn, this will be, turn will be 3. And then it comes to the logic, whose turn is it, and we need to create the third player's flow. Once again, I'm going to add a content step from the button here. I'm going to kill the connection next block. We don't want to have a default next block. We will want the logic to dictate where it goes next. Let's see, we are at R1 0 1 1 and then third player. It's probably an autoplay step once again, and let's say last player. Since we do know that this is the last player, we can state that. And then let's go back to the logic block and add one more thing to it. So turn 1, it goes first player. Turn 2, second player. And then we add another piece of logic and a condition. If turn is 3, then go to block third player. Now, when the tutorial works correctly, there's no other option here. It has to be either 1, 2, or 3. So we don't have to give any other logic to it. So that's it. And then we will do the same thing as before. Now we will skip the additional information. Players already got it. So we will give that out, but it will be in a bit shorter way. Let me show you how I'm gonna do it. 012 and play or recap. 2. Autoplay will be false, as it will ask, do you want to recap? Now, play your turn. Remember that you can't have two meeples in the sound. And this is how we skip one step. We'll give that information again here, and then tap on the button if you want to recap. There we go. And now once again we killed one more step. So the third player's flow is very short, unless they want a recap, which I don't want to recreate this button, so easiest way for me is to copy it. I'm gonna go here as before. I don't think we took a look at the smart object copying option last time. So when you open up the inspector, there's the smart objects button that will show all the smart objects inside your scene. There's a few options here. Right now, only thing we need is to copy a button, and this gives a little bit of information here so you know what the button does. We copy it to the clipboard. Great. And then we'll go here, and the smart objects, this is empty right now since nothing has been added to it. I'm going to paste this. This is one more way of copying objects. So now when we open it up, the button will be here, the logic will be here. So do you want recap? If not, then it will go to the end of the turn. There we go. We're gonna doodle with this a little bit more, since we haven't yet discussed on what happens if players end up in a village square. But I left that out on purpose, since it will add a bit more complexity to this. So now let's first figure out this where should the logic go when it hits the certain amount of turns. So let's call this go to round 2. So as I stated before, we will now figure out the amount of turns that has been played and compare it to this players count. So let's open this up. We want to do a logic here, of course, and we had a players count variable that we set. So it is either 2 or 3. So what we want to do is we'll change the value here to variable, so we can actually compare one variable to another. If players count EQ was equals turn, this means if all the players have played a turn, then go to plug round 2. Otherwise, keep going. I think it was waypoint 3. So it's a very simple kind of a logic, but it takes a bit of time to wrap your head around it. Let's take a bit of a closer look. So right now, when the logic comes here for the very first time, it is set as 1. You set increment turn by 1, so it is 1 when it flows through here. And when it comes here, the turn will be 1. And the players count you set in the beginning, and it is either, let's say it's 3. So players count is 3 and turn is 1. At this stage they do not equal. They are not equal. So it will go for another loop in waypoint 003. Okay, when it comes back here, it adds +1 to the turn variable. It goes through the whole flow, comes back here again, checks. Players count was 3 set in the beginning, and turn is now 2. They still don't equal, so it will go to waypoint number 3. And again for a loop. Third player's turn starts, it increments the turn variable by 1 once again, so it will be 3. It will go through the flow, come here and check. Players count was set 3 in the beginning, turn is now 3. They equal, great. Then it will go to block called go to round 2. This is how that block works. It keeps on looping until the turn is the equal amount of players count. That is how we can create a play loop, and that's how we can break from the play loop. And what is good to do here is I'm going to rename this logic, go to and reset values. So now that the round, the turn is 3 when it goes here, I want to reset it. So in the next round, when we once again start following turns, I want to set variable turn as 0 once again. So when it goes to the second round, the turn will be 0 as it's the first player's turn. I can set it as 1 as well. It depends on where you have your logic cubes to guide the flow. So one more thing, let's see how this works. Let's go back to globals. Since in the beginning, remember, we set the players count here in the beginning, but I do not want to click through the whole thing, so we can do a shortcut. When we go to globals, there's a test value bracket here. And when I set 3 as here and round here as 1, save it. Now when we use test values and we start from the middle of the tutorial, the test values here can be used. So I don't have to go in the beginning and click on the button 3 when I change this to test values. Now the player amount will be 3 and the round as 1 as I want. Okay, I'm gonna mute this, it's actually muted already, and start. When I click on this content step and start, it will start like this. And I can bring the inspector here from the right side, and it will show all the variables I have. players count is 3, round is 1. Let's start here. First player, you're up. It added already turn as 1. In the game, it gives the information, more information, asks you to do something, click forward, asks to do something, click forward. Second player, you're up. It went through the logic block and it incremented this value by 1, so now it's 2. It goes through again. Do you want help? Let's say we don't want help. Let's go forward. Last player up. It added 1, incremented this value by 1, so now it's 3. Now it equals the players count we set. Okay, a bit more information, and then it broke out from the loop. End of tutorial. It ended up here and it reset the values. That's how you create a play loop. Now, what we didn't do yet is ask the players if somebody has reached a village. In this game, you can have a card that is either 1, 2, or 3. So in the first turn, it is not possible to come to the village. But on the second player's turn and third player's turn, it is possible, since if 2 players play a card valued 3, the meeple will have to go to a village. So how do we handle that? Let's start editing this. This is the last thing we do today, so it'll take a few minutes. So let's see. It will in the play or recap thing, it will ask to play a card and move your meeple. Tap on the button if you want a full recap, otherwise tap forward after you are done. Actually, this needs to go here, since it needs to ask to fill the hand as well. Let's change that quick. Anyway, after this, it should ask the players, did somebody reach a village? So actually, instead of going here as a next block, let's create a content block where it asks, did somebody reach a village? Or did you reach a village? So there we go. It's called 013. Did you reach village? And now autoplay off and forward button will be hidden, since we'll have a question here, same as we had in the amount of players. So if the player chooses that they don't want to recap, they got it, they moved their meeple, they push forward. Let's go here and change the axle here to be straight from above. Move tool, add 2 buttons here. Zoom in, as we discussed about the camera angles. Try to keep your objects that are in focus within the 2 black borders. Perfect. Save tutorial camera. We could align these in a bit more. Well, they're actually pretty nicely aligned, so that's it. So this will ask whether the players hit a village or not. If they did not, it should go and tell the players, please, please, please fill your hand, go to block, refill, and end your turn. If they didn't. If they hit a village, they will need a bit more information. So let's create that as well. It's called R1-014. Additional village info. If you it shall be that you get an extra card. Autoplay off. We ask players to do something. There we go. And now we need to kill the connection between these, since it doesn't have a forward button anyway. Players need to click that yes, we came to a village. We'll add some logic, go to block, additional village information, save. Great. That is perfect. And then after this, it can go to refill your hand. Okay, that added a bit more to the flow. Now, what we need is as well is for the third player to get adoption. But now, how do we do that in an easy way? Since we want to use the same blocks, I'm going to show you. I'll move this a little bit, and then we'll do a logic block. Since in the first player's turn, it is impossible for the players to reach a village, correct? Yes. So let's do a logic here. If turn is greater than or equal to 2, so then go to one block, otherwise go to another block. So if it's second player's or third player's turn, it will go to ask a question, did you reach a village? Otherwise it will end your turn by that. So let's see. On the first player's turn, this logic will now flow through. Let's logic ask about villages, and we will connect these. First player's turn, it comes here. It's turn 1, no worries, it will flow through. But then, actually, that went to the wrong place. It needs to be 6. Now we will use this block here. When the players do not want the recap, it will have to go and ask about the villages anyway. So we'll connect the blocks here. Instead of ending the turn. Now, there we go. That should do it. So, what happened here? First player, let's follow this through. It goes in the straight line. It wonders about the villages. It's turn 1. It's turn 1, so it cannot go any place else than forward. It asks discard the card and then refill your hand. Actually, these need to be in a different order. I'm going to show you very soon why. That was a mistake on my part. Refigure this out. So after this needs to connect here. Just a little bit of maintenance which happens with every tutorial we do. Okay, that is fixed. Now, first player's turn, as mentioned. It will flow through, wonder about the villages. Nobody can be there yet. It has to refill the hand and go forward. Second player's turn, it comes here on the second player's flow. It asks, do you want a recap? Let's say you don't want a recap. It goes forward and wonders, did you reach a village? Yes, I did. It gives information. If you didn't, it doesn't give information. It just asks you to refill your hand and conclude your turn. Third player's turn, it comes here and it asks, do you want a recap? Yes or no. Let's say third player wants a recap. It goes to the main flow, comes here, and now since it's a third turn as stated here, it will go and ask about the villages. Do they want the additional information, or otherwise just refill your hand and end your turn. This is pretty much how the first turn would work in this game. So in the first turn you get all the information you need. We don't ask about the villages. We don't teach about the ending up in the same square. On the second player's turn, when the turn is 2, we will teach about that. Already ask, do they want a recap? Did anyone reach a village? And then go the third player's turn and the same thing. This is how you do a play loop. In a 2-player game, this lower part will never be shown to players. They will never see this. It will end up after the second player's turn, right here. And here we reset the turn variable, and that is it. That's how you create a flow that teaches the players information when they need it. And to avoid repetition and frustration, it will ask players, do they want a recap? So this minimizes the amount of information that is taught again and again. And it will already have interactivity. Did you reach a village? Did something happen? And if somebody reached a village, it will teach about it. It is possible that nobody reaches a village in the first round. That is good to remember. So you have to include this information on the second round as well, since that's by minimum when players will reach a village. We could do a flow here that goes before we go, it tells that before we go to round 2, please note that if you reach a village, this and this happens. Okay, first player, your turn. This is something that would be skipped if players have already learned about the villages here. So we can do all kind of cool stuff with the logic and the logic blocks and with the interactivity and the buttons. But these are very good to plan beforehand. Since if you start just doing these steps, you will quickly end up in a situation that we did here, that we forgot about the villages and then we needed to start modifying the flow. I knew what I was doing, so that was fine. But when you end up in a situation like that, when you figure out, oh, actually this can happen in the first turn, and then you need to start modifying the flow, that can become very difficult. So we'll try to avoid that. So that is, I'm gonna stop presenting here. That is all I had for today. I hope you learned about our teaching method and why we do this, certain things we do, and about how to minimize player interaction and minimize the repetition, and just to take away the frustration of I already know about this, and then react to situations such as the second player can only get this information, the first player cannot reach a village, so let's ask about it only on the second turn, and if it happened, then teach about it. Otherwise, don't. If we teach the second player about villages and they didn't reach one, they probably will just skip it through, like, okay, I'll get this later on, and then later on they might not have that information. So always ask, then teach, and then ask players to do. Those kind of the core things in a Dized tutorial. Remember to use the interactivity. Remember to teach when the players need the information. Be the demo person on the table. So that is it. On the there will be a 4th seminar as well that will continue from here, and I'd be more than happy to get ideas and feedback on what sort of things you'd like to concentrate the next time. One thing that I got asked a few times upon is a bit more animation work. So that is probably at least one aspect that we're going to concentrate on. We'll probably fill in the steps that we did today with some cool animations and kind of a focus on camera angles and maybe even a bit more camera animation. But as I mentioned previously, the camera animation, that's a very hard thing to master, so we used it very kind of wisely. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time. Bye bye.